What if the greatest threat to capitalism isn't a recession, a war, or a financial crisis, but its own most powerful invention? What happens when machines become so productive that millions of workers are no longer needed, yet those same workers are still expected to buy everything the economy produces? A company that replaces workers with artificial intelligence can look brilliant. Costs fall, margins rise, investors cheer, the stock price climbs, and the CEO speaks calmly about efficiency, productivity, and the future of work. But when every company tries to replace workers at the same time, capitalism runs into an old problem with a new machine. If workers stop earning wages, who is supposed to buy everything? Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. AI is usually discussed as a technology story. Faster tools, smarter software, better search, cheaper coding, instant images, automated customer service, digital assistants that never sleep, never ask for vacation, and never complain that the coffee machine is broken. But underneath the tech hype is a much older economic question. Capitalism does not only need production, it needs demand. It needs people with money to buy the goods and services that companies produce. And in modern economies, most people get that money from wages. So if AI weakens the wage system, it does not only threaten workers, it threatens the consumer base that keeps capitalism alive. This is the contradiction. Every company wants labor costs lower when it pays workers, but every company wants wages higher when those workers become customers. One firm can replace employees with AI and still sell to everyone else's employees. That looks efficient, but if too many firms do it at once, the wage base begins to erode. Then the system can produce more with fewer people, but sell into a society where fewer people have enough income to buy what is being produced. That is not just a labor market problem, that is a capitalism problem. Machines have promised abundance before. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the Industrial Revolution transformed Britain with mechanized spinning, weaving, steam power, and factory production. Output rose, costs fell, fortunes were made. But many skilled workers saw something darker. Machines were being used not only to produce more, but also to weaken their bargaining power, reduce the value of their skills, and reorganize work under owners who controlled the new technology. Between 1811 and 1816, the Luddites attacked textile machinery in parts of England. Today, the word Luddite is often used as an insult, meaning someone irrationally afraid of technology. But that is too simple. The original Luddites were not fighting machines because they hated progress. They were fighting a system in which machines were introduced in ways that destroyed livelihoods, weakened skilled labor, and shifted power toward factory owners. The fight was never humans versus machines. It was workers versus the people who owned the machines. That pattern kept repeating. Assembly lines made production faster, but also turned work into repetitive motion under managerial control. Mechanized agriculture reduced the need for farm labor, pushing millions into cities and factories. Computers transformed offices, eliminated clerical roles, created new industries, and changed who had value in the labor market. The internet destroyed some business models and created others. Automation did not simply take jobs in a straight line. It changed tasks, moved work, desk-skilled some roles, created new ones, and shifted power. That last part matters most. Technology does not arrive in an empty room. It arrives inside an economic system. If workers have bargaining power, technology can raise wages, shorten hours, improve conditions, and create shared prosperity. If workers lack bargaining power, technology can raise profits, weaken labor, concentrate ownership, and turn productivity into layoffs. The machine is not the whole story. The ownership structure around the machine decides who gets the benefit. AI feels different because it is not only aimed at muscle or routine factory work, it is aimed at cognition, writing, coding, translation, legal review, accounting, research, customer service, design, marketing, logistics, administration, analysis, and even management support. For decades, workers were told the safest path was education. Learn skills, get credentials, move into knowledge work, and do not be replaceable. That was the promise. Now AI is moving directly into the work people were told to get educated to do. The numbers are large enough to make even optimistic people sit up straight. The IMF estimates that around 40% of global employment is exposed to AI, and that in advanced economies, about 60% of jobs may be impacted. The IMF also notes that roughly half of exposed jobs may benefit from AI integration, while the other half may face lower labor demand, reduced hiring, lower wages, or even disappearance in extreme cases. Goldman Sachs research has estimated that generative AI could expose the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs globally to automation. The OECD says occupations at the highest risk of automation account for about 28% of jobs on average across OECD countries. An earlier OECD work estimated that 14% of jobs could disappear over 15 to 20 years, so while another 32% could change radically as tasks are automated. Exposure does not mean guaranteed elimination, but it does mean the wage system is entering dangerous territory, and the early signals are already visible. In finance and professional services, major firms are openly discussing how AI will reduce the need for certain roles, especially back office support and junior positions. Reuters reported that HSBC's CEO told staff not to fight AI as banks began job cuts, while Standard Chartered announced plans to cut nearly 8,000 positions and reduce corporate roles by 15% by 2030, with technology replacing what its CEO called lower value human capital. And that phrase is worth pausing on. Lower value human capital. Nothing says human-centered innovation quite like describing people as depreciating office furniture with pulse rates. For an individual company, the incentive is obvious. AI can reduce labor costs, it can speed up output, it can automate customer support, it can replace some junior analysts, paralegals, copywriters, translators, coders, designers, bookkeepers, and administrative staff. It can make one worker do what once required five. It can help executives tell investors a beautiful story. Productivity is rising. Margins are expanding. The company is becoming leaner. The worker hears AI assistant. The investor hears margin expansion. Those are not the same sentence. Even companies that worry about the social consequences may feel trapped. If competitors use AI to cut costs, refusing to adopt it can look like weakness. If investors reward automation, managers will automate. If executives are paid in stock, they have incentives to raise margins and future earnings. No CEO wants to be the last human employing company in an industry where investors are rewarding automation. That is how the system moves. Not necessarily because every executive wants mass unemployment, but because each firm is pressured to do what makes sense for itself. But capitalism is not just a collection of individual firms. It is an ecosystem. At the company level, replacing workers can increase profit. At the system level, wages are demand. Workers do not only produce goods, they buy goods, they pay rent, they pay mortgages, they buy food, cars, phones, furniture, insurance, subscriptions, childcare, healthcare, education, travel, and entertainment. They are not just employees, they are customers. If wages shrink across large parts of the economy, consumer demand weakens. The system may become brilliant at producing things for people who cannot afford them. This is the old contradiction inside capitalism. Capital wants labor costs low when it pays workers, but wages high when workers become customers. Every company wants fewer workers on its payroll, but every company still needs someone else's workers to buy its products. That is the trap. One company can cut headcount and still rely on the income paid by other companies. But if the entire economy follows the same logic, demand gets damaged. Production becomes more efficient, but society becomes less able to absorb it. Historically, capitalism has patched this problem in several ways. One is debt. If wages do not rise enough, people can borrow to keep spending. Credit cards, auto loans, student loans, mortgages, buy now, pay later plans, and personal loans can all help sustain consumption when income is not enough. But debt is not free demand. It is future income already claimed. It keeps the machine moving today by making tomorrow more expensive. If AI weakens wages while households already carry heavy debt, the patch becomes thinner. Another patch is government transfers. Unemployment benefits, tax credits, food assistance, healthcare support, housing aid, stimulus checks, public employment, or eventually some version of universal basic income can help maintain consumer demand when the private labor market fails to provide enough income. That may sound radical, but it is economically logical. If companies automate labor while still needing consumers, the state may be forced to support the consumption base that private employers no longer fund through wages. If AI replaces the paycheck, something else has to replace the customer. The third patch is asset wealth. People who own homes, stocks, retirement accounts, private businesses, or rental properties may keep spending because their assets rise. But this is not a broad solution because asset ownership is unequal. If AI concentrates wealth among the firms and investors that own the models, chips, cloud infrastructure, platforms, and data, then asset based consumption may sustain the top while everyone else becomes more fragile. A luxury economy can survive with fewer workers. A mass consumer economy cannot. Then there's the tax problem. Modern governments rely heavily on labor income taxes, payroll taxes, and consumption taxes funded by wages. If AI reduces labor income or shifts more income toward corporate profits, capital gains, and intellectual property, the state may face a fiscal squeeze. The public sector still has to fund pensions, healthcare, defense, infrastructure, education, debt interest, and social stability. But if the wage base weakens, governments may have to ask harder questions. Do you tax corporate profits more, tax capital gains more heavily, tax AI compute, tax robots, expand public ownership, fund universal basic income, subsidize retraining, or simply let inequality rise and hope the political system survives on motivational speeches? A capitalism that replaces workers may also replace the tax base that keeps the state alive. That is why AI is not merely a workplace issue, it is a state finance issue. It affects who pays for society when machines do more of the production and humans receive less of the income. If the gains are captured mainly by capital and the losses are carried mainly by labor, the political pressure will not stay polite forever. This is where the ownership question becomes unavoidable. The future will not be decided only by whether AI is powerful. It will be decided by who owns the power, who owns the models, who owns the chips, who owns the cloud infrastructure, who owns the data centers, who owns the data, who owns the platforms that distribute AI tools, who captures the productivity gains when one worker becomes 5 times more productive. Does the worker get higher wages, shorter hours, and more security? Or does the company cut 4 workers, keep one exhausted survivor, and call it transformation? Right now, investors are pouring money into AI because they expect it to raise productivity and profits. Chip makers, cloud providers, software firms, platform companies, and data center operators are being valued not only as technology businesses, but as possible owners of the next economic infrastructure. That should make everyone pay attention. Railroads once shaped industrial capitalism because they controlled movement. Oil companies shaped the 20th century because they controlled energy. Big tech may shape the AI economy because it controls computation, data, distribution, and the systems businesses increasingly depend on. The danger is not that AI becomes useful. The danger is that usefulness becomes dependency, and dependency becomes rent. For workers, this means the old advice is incomplete. Learn new skills still matters. Adaptability matters. Financial education matters. But skills alone do not solve the ownership problem. A worker can learn AI tools and still lose bargaining power if the employer captures all the gains. A freelancer can become more productive and still see prices collapse if millions of others use the same tools. A junior worker can use AI to do more. But if companies no longer hire juniors, the career ladder breaks at the bottom. A society cannot build experienced professionals if it automates away the entry-level jobs where people become experienced. Apparently, the future of work may involve needing 10 years of experience for a job AI already does badly. The real question is whether AI productivity becomes shared abundance or concentrated control. Shared abundance would mean higher productivity translating into shorter work weeks, better public services, lower costs, stronger wages, wider ownership, and more human freedom. Concentrated control would mean fewer workers, weaker demand, higher profits, more surveillance, more inequality, and a society where people are economically less necessary to production, but still politically necessary to keep the system legitimate. This is not a prediction that capitalism will automatically collapse. Capitalism is adaptable. It has survived depressions, wars, automation waves, financial crises, labor revolts, inflation shocks, and technological revolutions. But it adapts through power struggles, not fairy dust. The question is, who forces the adaptation and who pays for it? AI could create new industries, new jobs, new tools, and new wealth. But unless institutions distribute that wealth, the benefits will follow ownership. And ownership in the modern economy is already concentrated. So if AI replaces workers, what happens to capitalism? The honest answer is it depends on what replaces wages. If AI raises productivity and the gains are shared through higher wages, shorter hours, public investment, stronger safety nets, broader ownership, and fair taxation, capitalism could become more abundant. But if AI is used mainly to cut labor costs, enrich shareholders, weaken bargaining power, and concentrate ownership, then capitalism may become more unstable. High productivity, weak demand, angry workers, fragile tax bases, extreme inequality. The danger is not that machines become productive. The danger is that humans become economically unnecessary to the people who own the machines, while still being necessary as consumers, citizens, taxpayers, and human beings. That is the contradiction AI exposes. Not science fiction, not a robot apocalypse. Something colder and more familiar. Productivity without distribution. Abundance without purchasing power. Efficiency without security. History shows that technology does not decide who benefits from progress. Power does. The machine can produce more. The market can reward owners. The state can rewrite the rules. Workers can organize, adapt, or be forced to absorb the shock. Nothing about AI automatically guarantees financial freedom. But understanding the structure gives you the first advantage. You stop asking only what the technology can do and start asking who gets paid when it does it. Because the future will not belong to AI. It will belong to whoever owns AI, taxes AI, regulates AI, works with AI, and claims the wealth AI creates. The next decade may not be a battle between humans and machines. It may be a battle over who owns the machines and who benefits from their productivity. And that question will shape not only the future of work, but the future of capitalism itself. If you found value in this perspective, subscribe to the Wealth Code for more deep insights into money, power, economics, and the hidden forces shaping our world. Because understanding the rules of the game is the first step toward winning it.